to speak about the chapter on supplier management, and I'm going to go through the chapter with regard to how the relationship between suppliers and other supply chain partners is important for any industry or for any business to perform effectively, to be of a certain standard, and also when it comes to strategic planning or development of the whole supply chain. So, the importance of having the right selection of suppliers is because these factors impact in many ways. First of all, there's constantly a growing pressure to reduce material costs in an increasingly competitive environment, and that's because only when the cost of the product can be minimized, that's when you are able to sell your products to the consumers at a standard price. So minimization of cost of raw materials is highly essential. Purchasing and suppliers together, they also play a major role in terms of reducing the total cost as well. Again, companies nowadays are concentrating more on their core activities, more on their competencies, and are increasingly outsourcing their non-core activities. Now, for example, many South African manufacturers have outsourced their transportation, as this is seen as a non-core activity, which is not basically something that they are into. And we spoke about that in detail in inbound and outbound transportation, where companies prefer outsourcing third party logistics or use of fourth party logistics. Then the adoption of just in time, or JIT in short, like we say, to ensure that it assists in better selection of suppliers. But these are something that needs to be carried on constantly, especially very frequently if it involves high quality products. Then the growth of e-commerce and the booming of the internet has also created, or has also made the need to creation and development of supplier portals or creation of search engines and electronic auctions. So this in a way has enabled purchasing managers to look for new suppliers and also to make significant cost reductions. Then there are companies that have become integrated into supply chain. So the most significant development of the past decade has been the emergence and development of supply chain management, where we can see that the role of purchasers or the purchasing team and the suppliers are very important, and they lead to success in the supply chain as well. Then I spoke about JIT again, so the adoption of other platforms like your TQM, which is Total Quality Management, and Supply Chain Management by many organizations, either it is big or small, in both public and private sectors. It also requires an ongoing development and active management of suppliers, so which results in a close collaboration and which results in close partnerships with all the supply chain partners involved. Now, on the other hand, the selection of poor suppliers can also have its serious consequences. For instance, there can be out of stock situations that can result in loss of sales. There can be recall of products due to poor quality or out of specification parts. For example, we have heard of many recalls of automotive vehicle models due to cracking of their fuel pipes or due to something wrong in their cables. Another reason is the weakening of an organization's competitive position. This can also result in the loss of business opportunities or even threaten the very survival of the organization. So, as you can see, choosing poor suppliers has its own implications as well. Now, there are certain criteria that are laid down for selection of suppliers. Now, cost, quality, delivery are sometimes regarded as like the trinity of supplier evaluation, the first three important things. But these three are probably not adequate to use for certain non critical or low value purchases. But um, because of which there is need of other criterias as well. So in purchasing situations, the other additional criterias come into picture. As you can see on the screen, I have listed all of them. So if we were to very quickly go through each of them, so quality, where your quality products or quality services, it does influence the productivity of the organization, and it eventually brings up a competitive advantage to the company if they are offering quality products and services. Then the price, costs, and the cost structure. So the prices that the suppliers ask need to be investigated in case of non-standard items or services. Where possible, if suppliers can reduce their operational cost, then they are in a position to consider offering lower prices to the organizations that are purchasing from them. What will happen by doing so? It will lower their input cost, and also it would enable the purchasing organization to reduce prices to remain competitive and possibly achieve an increase in market share. Because the supplier is part of the supply chain, and if the manufacturer is making that progress, so in a way it is giving back to the suppliers as well. There should also be, when it involves cost and price, that is when we have the most friction and fight. So we have to make sure that there is complete openness between buyers and suppliers, and all the activities that are carried out that involves cost savings. In coming to delivery, as we know, on time delivery is important as organizations move increasingly towards demand pull approaches for both manufactured products and services. We should also make sure that as an organization, um, one should aim to reduce costs, because there is always a pressure to reduce inventories, and supplies are often required to make frequent and smaller deliveries so that they don't have to stock more on inventories. Then, when it comes to time, so there is a drive in supply chains to look for improvements in all aspects of time reduction. Now, that can be within, that can be outside, or it can be between organizations, and the aim of doing so is to fulfill customer demand as quickly as possible in order to obtain competitive advantage. Now, this is also true if you are delivering on time, you are saving yourself from another competitor's product that a consumer would have bought over yours. So time is of utmost importance as well. What do we have next? Then there is flexibility. Flexibility has become more important because when a supplier is selected for an integral supplier chain, flexibility is a criteria, because they must see how quickly a supplier can adapt to changing business conditions, to changing business needs, and develop new products and services. So, which means a supplier needs to be flexible in terms of volume, in terms of variety, in terms of mix, and also in terms of adopting to creation of new products. Then we have services. Then in services, it is expected of suppliers to go the extra mile in all aspects when it comes to customer service. So, for example, it can be around resolving any claims or resolving any complaints as quickly as possible, providing early warning in any changes in delivery or changes in disruptions in the supply chain. Then we have financial status and risk assessment. That is also important to determine the financial condition of a possible supplier, because while selecting a supplier, we need to make sure that he or the team is financially healthy, and it in a way reduces risk as well for the other supply chain partners, because it would be very unwise to select a supplier that is financially in a difficult position. Um, and this is one of the important criteria also for initial screening of all possible suppliers, so that they could eliminate any current or future risk. Then we have systems, so assessments of the operational planning and control and distribution systems used by a supplier is also important when a strategic supplier is needed for an integrated supply chain. So the operational part also needs to be assessed. The businesses need to establish how the suppliers plan, how they schedule, and how they control their operations. For example, how they manage when it comes to demand forecasting, or when it comes to planning manufacturing resources. So the ability to communicate electronically between customer and supplier is also another prerequisite that is already in place, and that is also another criteria to make sure that they have these kind of systems in place. Then we have technology and process capability. Now, when a purchaser considers a potential supplier's technology or a potential supplier's capability, a purchasing manager looks at the supplier's equipments and the processes in terms of understanding what their current and future capabilities are. Are they having the ability to develop new products or services? Do they have future capital available to invest if need be to buy new equipments for new products and so on? Then, in supply chain management approach, it has also become important in the supply of strategic materials or services that the suppliers' orientation towards this approach should be when it comes to selecting the right supplier. And also, as part of supply chain management, considerations needs to be taken if the supplier is aware and appreciating the supply chain approach that is followed by the team of supply chain partners, if the supplier sourcing policies and criteria are in place, how effective are the suppliers transport and distribution. So basically the whole supply chain management approach just for the supplier, how they are adopting lean manufacturing or not, how the suppliers' long term relationships are, and does it have a possibility of a partnership. So, this all speaks to the supply chain management itself for the supplier as such. Then we have BBAAA implementation, where especially in South Africa, there is an increasing pressure on businesses to give previously disadvantaged suppliers opportunities to develop and to promote the broad-based Black economic empowerment through selecting suppliers who come from these backgrounds. So having a certification or having a BBAAA score is also another criteria that needs to be fulfilled by um, the suppliers who fall under this category. So you can't just say I am triple B, double E certified, but you have to have an evidence of your certification and the score. Then the environment, ethics, and social responsibility. Now, that is of great importance for suppliers as well to be environmentally responsible, to adopt to environmental management systems like your ISO 14000. It would also be about environmentally friendly packaging, it would be about reuse, recycling, and remanufacturing, and responsibly disposing of waste. So, if they are adopting all these and if they are ethically sound and if they are having social responsibility in terms of awareness, in terms of ethical conduct, in terms of being socially responsible, covering issues like diversity in the workplace, testing products on animals, use of child labor if they are adopting such um, socially sensitive matters or not. Then the general business criteria, which falls under your capabilities, responsiveness, and motivation, present and future. So to make sure how responsive they are to changes, if they are looking for carrying on better employer-employee relationships within their company, how the staff morale is looked after, how is the supplier's attitude when it comes to ongoing education and training of staff and management, and also attitude of the supplier to meeting to the purchasing organization's requirements. So all these fall under the last section. So this is basically the steps and phases in supplier selection process. As you can see on the right side, that has been divided into three phases: pre-evaluation, post-evaluation, and pre-evaluation, evaluation, and post-evaluation phase. And within each of these stages, there are steps. So, for instance, in pre-evaluation phase, where they are establishing criteria for suppliers and they also are rejecting unsuitable suppliers. Then, in the evaluation phase, where they conduct research on suitable suppliers, they choose the evaluation method and analyze the suppliers and then select the suppliers. But on completion of supplier selection, there is a post evaluation phase where they make sure that they are having an ongoing measurement of supplier performance and also supplier accreditation. Now, if we come to the first step where we are identifying potential suppliers, now that could be done through a variety of sources of information and that is available for identifying possible suppliers. Many of these can also be used to carry out subsequent research on shortlisted suppliers. So the most important sources of information would be your internet search. It could be from company websites. It could be the chambers of commerce or business where they provide valuable information about possible sources of supply, like your local, regional, and national. It could also be about embassies and consular offices. We must be thinking what they do there, so they can be useful for obtaining information about international suppliers. Then national associations, they are basically associations or institutes that represent various industrial sectors of the economy as well as professionals that can be contacted in order to obtain a list of manufacturers or service providers. Then there are purchasing institutes where overseas purchasing institutes such as your Institute of Supply Management in US or the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply in UK, they provide information about their members that can be possible suppliers for your business. Then trade directories and journals, we know that where many industries publish information about their company, like your yellow pages, that is easily available also on the internet. Then there are industrial trade fairs where many industry sectors have their annual trade fairs, and there are also major exhibitions that happen where people can actually come together or visit to get in touch with possible suppliers. In the financial and industrial newspapers and magazines, we know that there is a wealth of data about suppliers in there, and then your existing suppliers and sales rep or your sales representatives basically are the very obvious sources of information. Now, that is where you identify who could be a possible supplier. Then we have the next step where pre-screening is done to reject unsuitable suppliers. Now, the process of supplier selection is long and drawn out, and at the same time, it is quite costly. So, especially if it involves visits to potential suppliers, hence, it is important to perform an initial screening operation to eliminate suppliers that are unsuitable. So, there are many grounds for the elimination of suppliers at the early stage. It could be because they don't meet the quality requirements. It could also be because of their financial situation. It could be they do not provide financial statements, so that gives a big question mark to the manufacturer to really think. Then, if they don't have the triple B, double E certification, if they're experiencing any labor issues or probably facing strikes often, if they have been previously removed or rejected from the supplier list, perhaps due to poor delivery or any such reason, and if they are posing a reasonable risk of interruption in supply. So, on these basis, the suppliers can also get rejected. And the third step is when there is research conducted on shortlisted suppliers. Now, there are several ways available for purchasing managers to use to obtain the information they need to research potentially suitable suppliers in relation to the selection criteria that we have spoken earlier. But clearly, the depth of the investigation and the criteria used will vary depending on the product or the service that is being purchased. But the information sources for supplier research, it could be done through supplier surveys or supplier questionnaires. It could be done through visits as well, where the cross-functional team they visit a potential supplier. They present them a good opportunity to obtain first-hand information, but also carry out an extensive audit. And through the supplier surveys or questionnaires, that is when extensively they have made a list of criteria in formulating the questionnaire, and the suppliers have to provide information on the basis of requested information. And in addition, the suppliers also may provide valuable information with regard to quotations, with regard to proposals. So that is where they are conducting research. Then the next step is where choosing the evaluation method and analyzing the supplier. Now, the evaluation method can range from informal to formal. The informal techniques include the manager's judgment for low value or non-critical purchase to panel, where a group would discuss the relative merits of each supplier before they could make a decision. Then, with one method, the supplier prepares and makes a formal presentation to the purchasing team, and then the presentation or the supplier visit is then used as a basis for formal evaluation. And then also another process is of formal is weighted points rating. I think I have it in the next, yeah, this page here. So if you can see, this is basically a simplified version of a weighted point supplier performance evaluation. Every category has been given a point or a score. So if you see, there are three suppliers and the company has to choose which is the best supplier. So if these are the three criteria on the basis of which a supplier is chosen, which is price, quantity, and delivery, and each of them has a weightage. So if it is supplier one, it's times two, and then for quality and then for delivery. So for the three suppliers, if they keep on adding their scores, if they were good, average, or poor, and then they give scores, obviously the highest score would be the one that is the best suited supplier for a particular company. Then in phase three, where we have supplier management, which is the maintenance or the post evaluation stage. Now that is where the phase in which is part of contract management. Okay, so after the evaluation, the selection and approval suppliers, it is important also to maintain and develop it. Why? Because at times it is seen that the suppliers have been presenting themselves well, their products have been reflecting what they are presenting, but once they are certified and chosen by the manufacturers, they just come down to the initial stage of performance, what they originally were, and then perhaps they were pretending them. So this post evaluation phase is also sort of a maintenance phase and also a developmental phase where companies ask suppliers to upgrade their facilities or develop the team by proper training. So that is where this phase comes into picture. This is also an important phase where a purchaser could motivate suppliers to comply with the agreed terms of the contract, to work together in order to eliminate unnecessary cost while they are trying to maintain the quality as well. And during this step, a purchaser also works very closely with the supplier to provide them any kind of assistance that they need. For example, if it comes to knowing the future demand of products or real-time sales information regarding the product, so that is when the purchaser assists them. Now coming to the next stage, which is ongoing measurement of supplier performance. That could be measured at regular intervals. It could be using the weighted point evaluation method that we just spoke now, or many organizations also base their ongoing measurements in terms of quality, in terms of cost reduction, in terms of on-time deliveries, and also in terms of technology and service that they provide. And then in the last step is supplier accreditation, where over time suppliers have gone through um, the selection and evaluation process successfully and are divided into three groups. The one is approved suppliers, second is preferred suppliers, and third one is certified suppliers. So the approved suppliers basically are the suppliers that have met the requirements of the supplier selection process, which is all the steps from step 1 to step 6. Preferred suppliers are the suppliers have shown that their past performance has consistently um, met the requirements of the supplier selection. That they have consistently met and exceeded the organization's required levels of criteria such as quality, cost reduction, delivery, and service, and then the certified suppliers, where certification of suppliers is the ultimate accolade for a supplier. So, which means the certification is sort of an in depth assessment of the supplier and around their quality management systems, and also is an example of constant continuous improvement. And moving on to supplier relationships. Now, supplier relationships between buyers and suppliers, they differ significantly. They may range from low value transactional based interactions to partnerships that are of strategic and financial importance for the business. So businesses rely on purchasing and on their suppliers because they're the ones who help them to reduce costs, enhance quality, and develop innovations. So keeping that in mind, there are three types of supplier relationships, each of which have common activities and attributes. They could be transactional relationship, it could be collaborative relationship, or it could be alliance or partner-based relationship. So if we speak about transactional relationship first of all, then this is a relationship which is quite a straightforward relationship between a buyer and a seller, in which the two parties do not get closely involved with each other, but simply exchange goods or services for payment. And most business transactions are of this type, and it is recognized as the most appropriate and effective arrangement for once-off purchases or for ongoing purchases for standard routine items. However, this does not mean that the supplier should not be handled without the necessary respect, but this kind of relationship cannot be also considered unimportant. Um, so, an example would be a once off purchase could be of a specific tool or a specific equipment that the company would need once off until the next 10 years or so. So, that's when the relationship is a transactional relationship. Collaborative relationship is where the buyers and the suppliers recognize a need for a cooperation with suppliers in order to achieve in order to achieve cost, quality, delivery, and time improvements. So, a collaborative relationship is the recognition of interdependency and is necessary for cooperation between purchasing organizations and suppliers. So, what happens? It results in benefiting both the parties, that may result in achieving a competitive advantage, and it does benefit in terms of building up trust, communication, planning, and promoting interdependency. Then, in collaborative relationships, purchasers and suppliers will have respect for each other, and they see each other's up as partners, and they rely on each other as well. Then, with the alliance or partnership based relationship, that is where it is multifaceted and it is goal oriented. It exists between two companies who share both risks and rewards. They require extensive collaboration and focus on identifying market and improvement opportunities. This also requires time. There is commitment of resources, information sharing, and the management of confidentiality. So, as well as it helps in creating a support system, developing trust, and also it's a way of measuring success. So, there is a good amount of commitment and involvement involved, and that is why it is clear that organizations should not have too many of these partnerships because it is quite unique and quite special in itself. These type of relationships also lead to long-term strategic benefits for both partners. So, as you can see, because of its range of commitments towards each other, it also builds up to a good long-term relationship. So, this here in the picture is a supply positioning model. So, if you can see in the figure here, the items or services are classified according to the situation in the supply market, the amount spent on the item or service, and the characteristics of the item or service. So, a partnership or alliance may also develop naturally as a result of a long term relationship and with the supplier and new demands on the parties to work together. So, there are 5 steps in this process. Um, And as you can see, depending in the metrics, this is where each of, if you are at a high risk and you spend low, there is a bottleneck. If you are at high risk and spend high, then there could be critical products or services. If you are at high risk and low spend, low risk and low spend, that is when many suppliers, there is a routine goods and services involved. And at the same time, if it is a low risk and high strain product, then these form as leverage products or services. Okay, and then the different levels of assessment. So suppliers, as we know, are strategically important for organizations. So not only is the delivery of their requirements important, but also the ability of the supplier to provide its clients what are their long-term requirements and needs is something that is equally important as well. So the supplier assessment is taken place on various levels. It could be at the product, process, quality, or the business organizational level. Now, if it's at the product level, at this level, the focus is on establishing and improving the quality of the supplier's product, and this is generally done by inspecting incoming goods and checking quality. If it is at the process level, then the supplier's production process is closely investigated. The quality of the product is also related to the production process, so the quality control process and the state of machinery are investigated at the process level. And during such investigation, it is also possible that one could identify any kind of wastage or non-value adding procedures in the production process as well. Then in the quality assurance level, the management of the quality assurance system is investigated by the client. This includes establishing quality awareness of all personnel at all levels. It also includes examining the process, maintenance, and also refining the quality inspection procedures. Then we have business organizational level, that is where the financial aspects and the quality of the management become the subject of investigation, and these are the crucial issues for competitiveness in the market. Okay, then on doing that, there are methods of assessment as well. So if we are assessing these, they are assessed either in the form of audit. They are either assessed personally, where there are specialists who have experience of the supplier and are asked to rate the supplier according to the agreed checklist. So they have been given a checklist and they have to follow this assessment procedures and assess the suppliers using these well-known methods. It could also be the weighted point method that I showed you in the figure, where they give scores and points in terms of good, better, or poor performance, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's about the chapter.